Hello and welcome to the Peter MacKay Motorsport Podcast. Thank you very much indeed for tuning into this episode. For those who haven't seen it yet, we've been very lucky on the show over the last month or so to capture some fantastic interviews with some stars of the motorsport world. I made the trip of a lifetime over to the Rolex 24 at Daytona a couple of weeks ago and was able to speak to a number of the key players in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, including Wayne Taylor and his two sons, Ricky and Jordan, who have had a lot of success at the Rolex 24 and many races in global sports car racing. And I had about 15 or 20 minutes with the guys. They were very generous to give me their time and have a chat. And we had a chat with all of them about their careers, past, present, and what's next in the future as well. So you can check that out via your podcast provider. If you subscribe to the show, you can do, and your device will give you a little notification whenever there's any new episodes, and you can go back through our entire episode archive as well. So that's quite cool. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, today we're going to talk about one of my favourite racetracks in the world, perhaps even my most favourite racetrack in the world, Bathurst. Now, Bathurst has one particularly famous race in the middle of October, the Bathurst 1000, which is the biggest race in motorsport in the whole of the Southern Hemisphere. The key round of the Australian V8 Supercar Championship, a 1,000-kilometre race across the Bathurst Mount Panorama circuit. However, one event that is growing very quickly year on year is the Bathurst 12-hour event that takes place usually the week after Daytona. So many of the drivers, having completed the grueling 24 hours of Daytona, they get taken off to the airport and fly all the way down to Sydney to make the trip to Bathurst for the 12-hour. Now, the Bathurst 12-hour is quite different in a number of ways to the Bathurst 1000 that they have in October. The big difference is the cars on show. The cars entered into the Bathurst 12-hour endurance event are GT3 specification cars. So, in the Bathurst 1000, it's very much a straight fight between the Ford Mustang and the Holden Commodore. Big V8 muscle cars. In GT3, you have a huge variety of machinery that can take part. And I run through the list of the configurations of car entered into this year's race. So we had a Mercedes AMG GT with a front engine big V8 in the front of the car and rear wheel drive, as all the cars are. We had the Nissan GTR with a big twin turbocharged V6 mounted in the front. We had the Bentley's Continental GT with a huge big V8 twin turbo V8 in the front. We had the new Aston Martin. We had the new Aston Martin Vantage. We have the big V10 mid-engined Audis and Lamborghinis. We have the mid-engined Honda NSX with a twin turbo V6, and last but not least, we have the BMW M6 GT3 with the big engine up in the front. So a variety of different types of cars, different sizes, different weights, different everything. But what you'll notice when you watch GT3 sports car racing is that the field is incredibly even, and the reason for that is that the organisers of the Bathurst 12-hour, a company called SRO, it stands for Stefan Rittel Organisation, who organised a large proportion of the world's sports car racing competition. And Stefan Rittel's organisation were the creators of the original GT3 formula, which is now so successful across the globe. And what they do to ensure the parity in performance is something called balance of performance. Now, as we talk about balance of performance quite a lot on this podcast, and funnily enough, we talk about it in pretty much every series that it is implemented. It's often referred to in the sports car racing paddock as a necessary evil, because if you think of the road cars, that all the cars that I just mentioned a moment ago, if you think of the road cars that all these cars are based upon, they they are all very, very different and have varying abilities and varying levels of performance. There's, just remember that there's two, I've forgotten two very important ones: the Porsche 911, a rear-engine flat six normally aspirated car, and the brand new McLaren 720S GT3. So you have even more categories of cars involved. But in order to ensure that a McLaren 720S, which in road trim form would absolutely destroy a BMW M6, for example, or a Bentley Continental, which won the race in the end. And that's what the organisers do. If there's certain cars that need a little bit of a help, they'll take weight away, or they'll change their fuel restrictor size. Or if there's a car that's too fast, they'll add weight and change the fuel restrictor size as well. And it works very, very well. Unfortunately, it's open to manipulation by cars going deliberately slowly, hoping for a break in their balance of performance before a race. So there is a little bit of that involved, and it's entirely impossible to get it absolutely spot on. And of course, you almost must remember is that the quality of the drivers within each car are going to vary. That's just, otherwise motorsport would be very, very boring if there wasn't varieties in the quality of driver and the styles of driving as well. And of course, there may be some drivers that might be able to extract more speed from, say, a mid-engine V10 Lamborghini than they can from a front-engine BMW, for example. So, but that's what makes the sport so exciting to watch on the TV, but also trackside as well, because these cars all made by different manufacturers from all over the world, and each manufacturer has their own ethos of how they produce a performance car. So all of these cars that you'll see racing in races like the Bathurst 12 Hour and its sister events, the Kyalami 9 Hours and the Spa 24 Hours, you know, these are cars that you can go out and buy. You know, you could walk out to your local showroom and buy a Mercedes AMG GT. You could buy a Nissan GTR. You could buy a Bentley Continental, a Porsche 911, and so on. And that is the cool thing about, you know, you could sit trackside at Bathurst or one of these races and shut your eyes and you would be able to tell the cars apart. The screaming high-pitched wail from the Porsche 911 GT3, then you have the thundering rumble of the big Bentley, and then you have the loud shriek of the Lamborghinis and the Audis, which share a very similar normally aspirated V10 engine. So that's certainly what makes it an interesting spectacle before you even get involved in how close the racing is. So what makes Bathurst particularly unique? Well, there are a lot of things that makes Bathurst particularly unique. It's actually not a permanent race circuit, and there's very few events permitted to take part on the Mount Panorama mountain circuit, and the sheer change in elevation over the lap is quite extraordinary. The pits and starts finish straight are based right down at the bottom of the hill, and the drivers turn left around the first corner and head a big drag up the hill, up over the mountain and back down what's called the Conrod Straight, which is one of the fastest sections in global motorsport, as they come around a flat out right-hander into a chicane called the Chase, which is just an extraordinary thing to witness. So Bathurst, is a lot of the drivers refer to it as a street circuit, and over the top of the mountain it requires such precision to just thread they're quite large cars, GT3 cars, to thread these big cars in between these narrow gaps. And of course, what you'll also see in Bathurst, there are not too many entries within this class. They do allow a few entries in the GT4 class, which of course are much more standard road car based vehicles with a lot less experienced drivers in them and less pace in the car as well. So that creates another problem for the much faster GT3 cars filled with professional drivers making their way through over the top of the mountain. It is, if you ever if you're a fan of watching onboard videos on YouTube, if you're not, why not? And if you're not, go onto YouTube and look at some Bathurst onboard videos, because they are just, it is you really see the talent of a professional racing driver driving through the top mountain section. Scott McLaughlin, the current double V8 Supercar champion and the current reigning Bathurst 1000 winner, have a search for his, I think it was his 2017 Bathurst qualifying lap. It's just the most extraordinary thing to watch. Now, the Bathurst 12 hour has an interesting approach. It actually starts in the dark. It starts very early in the morning at 5:45 a.m. and then runs through to 5:45 p.m. Later on in the day. So starting in the dark, completely different to any other race on the calendar. And the cars obviously start as pitch black, starting with it's just a big, swarm of cars with all their lights on. And then, of course, as the race progresses into the first hour and a half, the beautiful Australian sunshine starts to rise over the circuit. And some of the photographs, often the finest photographs taken in any racing season, are usually within the first 2 hours of the 12 hours of Bathurst. It is just an extraordinary thing to see. Now, what did we see at this year's Bathurst 12 hour? Well, one thing we did see was a lot of attrition. 11 cars were not classified at the end of the race. There was a lot of accidents, some really quite heavy accidents. There are no slow crashes at Bathurst, and the level of runoff is very small. In a lot of the parts of the circuit, there is no room for error, and if you make a mistake, it's going to be a huge accident. And we saw in a number of cases across the weekend just how safe modern racing cars are, and the equipment that the drivers wear, how safe it keeps them in such high speed impacts. And I think as the performance of the cars continues to grow, as it always will, motorsports, the speed of development will always carry on. So does the safety in line with that, and the drivers are kept as safe as they can be, considering the challenge that they're taking on. So we saw a lot of cars dropping out. We saw Audi have an absolute disaster with a lot of their cars crashing, having punctures, having mechanical failures. Really bad race for the Valvoline Audi, who came with basically three factory cars to come and win the Bathurst 12 hour, and they were humiliated by their opponents. But who did we see win the race? Well, we saw the Bentley Boys win their first ever Bathurst 12 hour. Now, the Bentley is probably one of the most least likely racing cars in global sports car racing. If you've ever seen a Bentley Continental road car, they are vast things. Two-door coupe, very big engine up in the front, a very heavy road car, probably be well over, I would imagine it'd be nearer 2.5 tons for a Bentley road car. So to make a GT3 racing car off that platform is quite extraordinary, and the pace that they can get out of these racing cars, considering what the car is based upon, is quite extraordinary. Now, the Bentley sports car racing effort has been on the scene for a couple of years now, and it is actually the rally team M Sport, Malcolm Wilson's outfit in Cumbria, that actually run the Bentley factory GT team. And it was the head of racing at Bentley approached Malcolm Wilson, saying that he would like to take Bentley back into racing, and he would like M Sport to be the partner to do that. And Malcolm Wilson said, "Oh yes, we'd be delighted to try that, but you do know that we don't have the experience of circuit racing. We're a rally team, that's what we do." But M Sport has taken to it really well, with Malcolm's son Matthew running that side of the business. But this is a big race that they've tried and come so close to winning on so many occasions. So to finally get through and win the race was really special for that team. And the number 7 car of Jules Gounon, Jordan Pepper and Maxime Soulier, they were in another world. And I think it was just their day. Basically, a lot of people could say, "Oh, it's balance of performance, it's this, that, and the next thing." They still didn't have the ultimate fastest lap, funnily enough, but their consistency of pace was just metronomic. They were always kept honest by the number 60 McLaren 720S and the AMGs, particularly the AMG's Mercedes, were the ones that caused Bentley the biggest problem throughout the race. But Bentley, you got that feeling that if the rain stayed away throughout the race, Bentley were going to have the pace to win, and they did do, and they deserved it. They thoroughly deserved it. Now, I just mentioned the weather. Let's talk about the weather, because it was a very, very unusual race in terms of weather. We were promised rain. We thought rain was coming, and we waited, and the warnings came and went, and there was significant storms all around Mount Panorama, all around Bathurst and its race circuit, within very, very close vicinity to the racetrack. But during the race, they managed to avoid that threat of rain. However, throughout the race, the wind was absolutely extraordinary. Up on the top of the mountain, you saw all of the fans with their tents and gazebos that were virtually having to physically hang on to stop them blowing away off down the mountain, or perhaps even worse, onto the circuit. The side winds must have been extraordinary, and when you're coming over the top of the mountain in a GT3 racing car at absolute full maximum attack, and you get a big gust of wind, that cannot be very pleasant, I can imagine. So the challenge for the drivers was extraordinary. Also, the dust as well that was being blown across the circuit really added what is already a significant challenge, the Bathurst 12 Hour. But to do that, it was just extraordinary. We also, as you always see at Bathurst, you see a lot of it. You see very, very high temperatures as well, which was wreaking havoc with some of the cars, and I'm sure that's where a lot of the mechanical failures that we saw in the race came from. Now, the rest of the podium, in second place was the number 60 McLaren, 59 Racing McLaren of Alvaro Parente, Ben Barnicoat and Tom Blomqvist. Now, I have to say, the new McLaren 720S GT3 is one of the most beautiful race cars in the world. It's got the fantastic lift up, almost like gull wing doors that open up like a bat's wing. It looks about 3 inches off the floor at the roof. It's an extraordinary looking piece of kit. The 720S road car is a pretty thing, of course, but the race car is something else. And the 59 Racing team had the car painted in a lovely blue with orange and white stripes, harking back to the old Gulf liveried McLaren F1 GTRs of the 1990s, and that is a very, very good thing indeed. The McLaren could have easily won the race, actually. Unfortunately, was given a stop-go penalty earlier in the race, which did hamper their chances. We saw in the first stint, Ben Barnicoat at the wheel, while the race was still relatively under darkness, pulling off the most extraordinary overtaking manoeuvre into the chase, which is the fastest part of the circuit, where the cars are braking more or less from their maximum speed down to second or third gear, and nearly colliding with the car in front, but managed to avoid that. So I really hope we'll see the McLaren 720S in some more GT3 racing across the world. Of course, the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship in America adopts the same rules. They call it GT Daytona in America, but in essence, it's a GT3 car. We did see a GT3 car, a 720S McLaren GT3 entering a few races in IMSA last year with the Compass Racing outfit. Hopefully, we'll see them back at some point this year, because McLaren have such a great racing heritage, and I think the 720S is their best looking racing car since the F1 GTR, in my opinion. Completing the podium was the 888 Racing, number 888, AMG Mercedes of Maxi Goetz, Shane Van Gisbergen and Jamie Whincup. And of course, if you're not familiar with Shane Van Gisbergen and Jamie Whincup, those two drivers race for the class-leading 888 racing team, the 888 Holden racing team in the V8 Supercar Championships, and are renowned as, well, the team is renowned as one of the best in the history of the sport. And Jamie Whincup is certainly statistically one of the very best in the sport, and Shane Van Gisbergen also. So the quality of driver lineup in there was just extraordinary. Now, Jamie Whincup does a couple of one-off outings in GT racing cars throughout the year, particularly here at Bathurst in the 12-hour. But Shane Van Gisbergen is known for just wanting to get in and drive absolutely anything. He's very successful in the V8 Supercar Championship with lots of wins in a championship as well. But he loves getting into GT racing cars, and his big aspirations have made it very public that he wishes to take on the Le Mans 24 Hours. And let's keep our fingers crossed that he will get the chance to do that very soon. Unfortunately for Porsche, they, despite having a star-studded lineup of cars and drivers, they didn't manage to get their car on the podium after winning the race in the closing stages dramatically last year. If you haven't seen the move to win the Bathurst 12-hour last year in 2019, again, your YouTube homework, go and watch. Just type in Matt Campbell Bathurst 12-hour and just watch and marvel at the skill and the bravery of where he pulled that overtaking manoeuvre off. So Matt Campbell was in the leading Porsche in the race, which came in 4th position, the 911 Absolute Racing Porsche of Matt Campbell, Matteo Jaminet and Patrick Pilet, all 3 full-time Porsche factory drivers. So Porsche were leaving nothing to chance with their driver lineup, but just didn't quite they had an advantage in their fuel economy. They were able to stretch the fuel out of their 911 GT3 a little bit longer than their competition, but just lacking that ever so slight amount of outright pace. The number 1 car, the Earl Bamber Motorsport car, with Earl Bamber, Lawrence Vantor and Craig Lowndes on board, unfortunately had brake issues in the early stages of the race and had to make a disc and pad change in the race, which dropped them out of contention and put them back a lap or two. Now, of course, Earl Bamber and Lawrence Vantor, the reigning IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship champions at the moment, and Craig Lowndes, who's just simply a legend of Australian motorsport. So again, I hope this gives an impression to just how high the quality of cars, how high the quality of teams, and particularly the quality of drivers that go to the Bathurst 12-hour. Now, although the Bathurst 12-hour is now finished, you can go on to if you subscribe to GT World on YouTube, which is basically the live stream channel for all of the SRO sports car racing events, and you can go back and watch races as well. So if you want to have a look at what the Bathurst 12-hour is all about, you can do. Also, all of the live coverage of these big iconic races like the Spa 24 hours and the Kyalami 9 hours and the Suzuka 10 hours as well, they will be coming up there as well. So if this sort of racing sounds like your thing, you can watch it for free on YouTube. And I have to say, I've talked about it before with IMSA. They offer a lot of their races up for free on their YouTube site a couple of days after the race takes place, and you can stream it live for free on their website. I think that's a very, very important way to grow the overall fan base. And you just had to look on social media when the Bathurst 12-hour race was going on. The sheer amount of noise and traffic and interest on social media was extraordinary. And of course, where would these people be watching? For free on the internet. So check it out. It's if you've never seen Bathurst before and you're a race fan, you're in for a treat. Final mention before I sign off, and something of a little bit of a sneak preview into what we're going to do a little bit in the future with our podcast here. I was looking through my social media a couple of days ago, just taking in the relevant gossip in motorsport at the given time, and I saw this article on, I think it was on Racer.com, or either Racer.com or Sportscar365, I can't remember, and it said, and I just couldn't quite believe what I was reading, because it said the caption was, Verstappen late race crash loses him 12 hours of Bathurst win. And of course, we're not talking about the actual 12 hours of Bathurst, but talking about the equally highly competitive iRacing 12 hours of Bathurst. So the very popular simulator iRacing, which you can subscribe to on the internet and compete with drivers all over the world. iRacing held a couple of weeks ago a 24 hours of Daytona iRace over the internet, and also have done so with Bathurst as well. And you're talking about a genuine, current Formula One driver, not just a current Formula One driver, one of the finest Formula One drivers in the championship right now, who is entering these races as a way of having fun or a way of developing his skills or whatever. But the key thing is he is there, and I think I'm going to do a proper full podcast on iRacing and simulator racing in general, and how it has opened up a whole new category of motorsport. So if you're sitting watching the 12 hours of Bathurst on your TV, or the 24 hours of Spa or whatever, and you're watching it on your TV going, I would love to do that, but I would never have the money, or I'm too old now, or whatever. Well, now we live in a world where for not that much money, you can create a homemade setup at home. Max Verstappen will be doing it from his home in Monaco. You can have a proper setup at home and compete with genuine real world racing drivers, and equally competitive virtual racing drivers as well, for a fraction of the cost of even a set of tyres and an entry fee to a local club race. So I want to delve into that more. That's for another time, but I wanted to mention that. I just thought that was really cool. A week after the real world event, they had the virtual racing event with guys like Max Verstappen involved. So thank you very much for tuning into this episode. I really appreciate it. We're getting ever closer to the start of the motor race, or to the full-on start of the motor racing season. It's not going to be long till World Superbikes will be back at Phillip Island. We're not all that far away from MotoGP getting started as well, so I'm getting so excited about having more racing around to talk to you guys about as well. As I say, don't forget to, if you haven't already, subscribe to our show. That helps a whole bunch to get others involved with the show. And if you wish, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts as well, so that others can find the programme. I'd be very grateful if you could do that for me. You can also follow us on Facebook, which is the Peter MacKay Motorsport Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram, which is @MacKay Podcast. No, that's the Twitter, sorry. The Instagram is @Peter MacKay Motorsport. It's getting confused with all these social media things. So you can check us out on all of there, and you can also go on our website, petermackaymotorsport.com, where I'm going to start for each episode producing a little article, a little bit of explanation for each episode, and a little bit of background which we can't include in the podcast. So you can check that out on there as well. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to you again very soon.